With the festive season upon us, the Department of Transport has sent a stern warning to those who will be found contravening the rules of the roads. The department has promised to intensify its national road safety. To look into the department's plans to keep our roads safe this festive season, I'm now joined by its spokesperson, Ayanda Ali Payne. Ayanda, good to have you on the show. Now, before we get into the business of the day, this interview comes at a time where several trucks were burned on the N12 in Gauteng, with several suspects still on the run, and yet another truck being burned since April. What is the department's comment on that?
Well, Natia, very good afternoon to you, to your listeners as well. Thank you so much for joining us, your viewers. We do appreciate the time. It is such a terrible state of affairs as it pertains to the trucks. You'll remember that this is not a new phenomenon. It began even last year as Minister Mbalula took office in the Department of Transport. In his wisdom, the presidency created an interministerial team to look into these issues, because it was not just a matter of transport. The president was of the view that labor needs to come to the fore predominantly, because at the forefront of this issue were issues about foreign workers who are said to be taking jobs from locals. But it was also a police matter, because whenever you see criminal acts of arson and vandalism of property, then it becomes a crime that police must adhere to. But we also saw that intelligence needs to come to the fore as well. So state security was also incorporated as it pertains to this particular interministerial team. So Minister Mbalula has been hard at work with a number of other ministers as well to make sure that where needs be, legislation is adjusted when it comes to labor laws, but also as transport regulation needs to be tweaked a little bit. That's something that's happening. And where crime and criminal acts have been conducted, I know that the police has been investigating. This is something that is still undergoing special attention, and is top of the agenda from, as I mentioned, a number of these departments.
Now, as a custodians of road safety, as a transport department, how concerned are you? We're talking about probably more than 80 trucks that have been burned since April this year. What are some of the conversations that you are having with those partners that you've mentioned, including the Labour Department and the South African Police Service?
Well, Nanti, we're extremely concerned, not only just about the safety of the truck drivers themselves who have experienced petrol bombing, as you would know, but fellow road users. You have families this time of year who are going to their various holiday destinations. You'll soon be having children going back to school and the like. So we are definitely keeping a close watch on this, but also as it pertains to the economy, if we may turn our eyes away from just road safety and look at how the economy will face very dire repercussions as a result of this. Should we see a situation where truck owners are saying it is too dangerous for our drivers and vehicles to be on the roads, therefore we will refrain from transporting goods? Where does that leave the country at large as far as the economic state of affairs is concerned, but also food security? So we are looking at this, as I mentioned, with the seriousness that it deserves, and going through the various issues with a fine-tooth comb, separating matters where needs be. Like I said, if it's a transporting regulation matter, or perhaps a labor or home affairs matter, it's getting that individual attention, but equally just as important, the integration of responses and the joint force is also something that needs to happen. So this is something that we are looking to see a swift recovery of the sector itself. We're looking to see a swift response in terms of the various law enforcement officials and people brought to book, so that the crimes that have been committed can be punished.
Now, the festive season is upon us, and many people will be making use of our roads, and I believe some have already started, with December 16 being next week. Now, you've got several campaigns that are earmarked at road safety on the go currently as a department. What are you going to be doing differently this year, taking into cognizance that we are on the second wave of the pandemic?
100%. So it's a two-pronged approach that we're looking at this festive season, Unati. Of course, road safety and reducing the carnage on our roads, always top of the agenda. But as it pertains to COVID-19, making sure that the regulations are being adhered to. Yesterday, Minister Mbalula, as well as the Joburg mayor and the MEC, Masbuko, were on the road. And we've experienced the phenomenon where even the taxi drivers were getting what we call COVID fatigue, where you get into the taxi and with your mask on, but as soon as 5 minutes or 10 minutes go by, you then remove that mask. So law enforcement officials will have to make sure that your COVID regulations are being adhered to. Stringent measures must be put in place to make sure that there's sanitizers, for example, in your actual taxis, and that these vehicles are being sanitized regularly. So that's the one component. And back to the one that we started off with road safety, we cannot relax. Unati, we're looking at figures of in excess of 14,000 people who perish in South Africa's roads annually. Now, you can just imagine the toll that it takes on our economy, the toll on families, and the very fabric of our society. So the message is clear. You buckle up, you keep a safe following distance, you refrain from drinking and driving, you refrain from texting and driving, you also abstain from excessive speed. And then we're going to make sure that law enforcement is out in their numbers 24/7 to ensure that we see as minimal damage as possible as it pertains to road carnage.
Now, realistically, how will you be doing this? I mean, we've taken into account several things that, are happening simultaneously this year because we are faced with a pandemic. You also need to ensure that the safety of the members, is adhered to because they're also susceptible to this pandemic. Where are your hotspots currently, Ayanda, as a department? What are you looking at?
Yeah, you're quite right, Unati, because we actually saw the effects of COVID-19 even in your driver's license testing centers, which led to the backlogs that we experienced. Because every time one of the DLTCs would open up, one of these staff or the employees themselves would get a COVID positive report and all the operations would have to shut down. So God forbid we have a traffic officer who's on the ground who gets COVID-19 and then spreads it. So we're making sure that there's not only education and awareness within the actual force or service, but also as it comes to how you get the motorist to show you their license card, how you ask them to sign things and sanitize thereafter. So there's a lot of awareness in that front. But when it comes to reducing the deaths that we see on the roads, we're tweaking things slightly because we're also focusing on your passengers. Sometimes you're sitting in the passenger seat and you think your job is just to put your legs up and to relax. And we're saying no. We're saying it's your job to also make sure that you buckle up. It's your job to ensure that the driver, if they're doing a long distance haul, stops every 2 hours. It's your job to make sure that the driver is not consuming alcohol and driving. It's also the job of the pedestrian.
Absolutely.
People walk across the road with their earphones on and they can't hear then when there's hooting. So
behavior change. Ayanda, I'm so sorry. I have to interrupt our interview at this time. We've run out of time, but thank you so much for speaking to us. We'll obviously be following up with the department throughout this festive season. Thank you so much for your time. Ayanda Ali Payne from the Department of Transport.